to open this second conference on wetlands. We have a very dense agenda today, but we will be pleased to share all the developments that have taken place over the past year since the first conference indeed organized by MedWet and UFM together. As I said, the agenda is very, very dense, so it will be my greatest pleasure to immediately start with the welcome remarks and give the floor to our new Deputy Secretary General at the UFM, at the Union for the Mediterranean, Mr. Almodaz Abadi. Mr. Abadi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alessandra, for the well organization of this important session. I am pleased to be with you today. And I would like to comment on the presence of our co-presidency, Patrick and Abdullah, with our great representative from the ministry from Slovenia, Katya. I am pleased to be with you even virtually from Cairo, where we are following another endeavor here. But at the same time, I am very here to express the importance of the wetland in our operation, not only at the technical level, but also at the political level in the agenda and how this wetland and ecosystem work, interface, land and sea will enable us to enhance the cooperation and enhance the socio-economic in the region. As you know, wetlands cross-cut all the area of activity which my division is leading, namely environment, water, green, blue economy, and are indeed an essential sources for natural and economic benefit at local and regional level. Together with MedWet, we are promoting more and more the involvement of the South Mediterranean country, which myself, coming from Palestine, represent, among other, at the UFM, ensuring the involvement of national, but also more and more of the local authority, which we have with us today. We come from COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, where for the first time ever, the Mediterranean family had successfully organized Mid-Pavilion, led by the Union for the Mediterranean, set up a 70-side events carried out all over the 2 weeks of negotiation, and we are moving toward another crucial COP, COP15 on biodiversity, scheduled in 2 weeks' time in Montreal. In the meanwhile, between the above-mentioned COPs, the Ramsar COP took place, and we have very good news from this gathering. A dedicated Mediterranean wetland resolution have been approved, and today, Mr. Sata, the coordinator, will more extensively talk about it. My deepest congratulations for you and your team, Mr. Sata, and colleague for the extraordinary achievement on this regard. Let me conclude my intervention by introducing you to today's meeting, as we have 2 main sessions. First one, focusing indeed on the key messages from the Ramsar Resolution Mediterranean, wetland, and the way forward, and how this gathering can wetland-based solution, tool, and achievement, which is a program labeled by the UFM, financed by MAVA, with 3 subsessions on the knowledge and practice in the Mediterranean, communication and public awareness, and policy recommendation and implementation. Allow me to wish you a successful meeting today, and we are looking forward to receive the recommendation. My dear Alessandra, at the end will bring these recommendations not only over the screen, but also to put them in our work plan and activity with our member state. Thank you very much.
Many thanks.
Alessandra, I give you.
Many thanks, Mr. Abadi, for your opening remarks, and indeed for the important work, the words that will bring us throughout, the session today, and indeed to this final conclusion to work forward, to build on for the months to come. I will now pass the floor to our co-presidencies. So first we have the EU co-presidency. We have Patrick Wegert from DG Environment. So Patrick, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alessandra. I hope you can hear me okay. Very
well.
Good morning, Deputy Secretary Abadi. Good morning, Co-President, and good morning to everyone. I'm very happy to join you then today for this second conference on the restoration of Mediterranean wetlands, looking at wetland nature-based solutions. As Almutaz has said, the meeting takes place at a crucial time, and I'll cover two particular elements which are relevant at global level and then at EU level. So just over a year ago, the ministers of the UFM countries and Commissioner Timmermans on behalf of the EU met in Cairo, adopting a ministerial declaration which set out priorities for action on the environment and climate change in the region. And those included to limit average global temperature rise to 1.5, to halt and reverse biodiversity loss, and to reduce air pollution. Now, as Almutaz has referred to already, next week we will start with the CBD COP15 meeting in Montreal in Canada. So faced with the parallel climate and ecological crises, the EU is aiming for an ambitious and transformative global biodiversity framework to be adopted at COP15. And one of those will be a target then for 30% of land and sea to be under some form of protection by 2030. So that's the equivalent of the Paris 1.5 degree target that we have there, something that all countries can aim for, which will be very relevant also obviously for wetlands. But conserving and restoring biodiversity and ensuring its sustainable use are indispensable for sustainable development, for poverty eradication, and also for achieving our climate change objectives. As we say, climate change and biodiversity loss are two sides of the same coin. You can't address one without addressing the other. So that's at the global level. We have then CBD coming up next week. At EU level, we have proposed early this year regulation on restoration, which is the first piece of legislation on nature at EU level for over 30 years, since the Habitats and the Birds Directive of the 80s and early 90s. So we're witnessing continuing ecosystem degradation and biodiversity loss across the EU, and we recognise that protection is not enough on its own and voluntary targets aren't sufficient. So on that basis, a new approach is foreseen, with us proposing, as I indicated, legally binding targets for nature restoration. So that would mean by 2030, restoration measures will cover 20% of EU lands and sea, including wetland areas. And by 2050, measures will be in place for all ecosystems in restoration. So wetlands are a key area for biodiversity and adapting for climate change in the region. And the work of this group is clearly important in achieving these objectives. With regard to the restoration, this is intended to show that the EU is walking the walk as well as talking the talk in relation to targets that will be established also at global level and the CBD COP15. I'll be happy to come back to the group and update them on the progress in relation to restoration, given its significance for wetlands in the region in due course. But I'm aware that this time is very short, so I wish you a very fruitful meeting, and I look forward to following the work of the group in due course. Thank you. I hand the floor back to you, Alessandra.
Many thanks, Patrick. Many thanks actually for linking indeed to the ambitious goals and targets and negotiations actually at COP15, as well as with the nature restoration law that indeed the EU is promoting, and it's also part of the Euro-Mediterranean dossier. So I would like to move now to the next intervention from our Jordan co-president, Mr. Abdallah Al-Saud, Director at the Ministry of Environment of Jordan. Abdallah, the floor is yours. Should you wish to speak in Arabic, the interpretation is there.
Okay, thank you, Alessandra. First of all, I would like to join my previous speaker, Al-Mu'tasam and Patrick, and thanking you for being with us for the second conference. We intend to ensure your continuity to long-term process, and this conference represent approaches to opportunity to vary and exchange role progress on the priority Euromed fields. Let me please, I will speak in Arabic. أود أن أؤكد هنا أن الأراضي الرطبة تضمن الصحة والرفاهية سكان البحر الأبيض المتوسط من خلال توفير مياه ذات نوعية جيدة ومن خلال التخفيف من الآثار السلبية للتغيرات المناخية، وأيضا المساهمة في إنتاج الغذاء والحفاظ على التنوع البيولوجي. وتعد الخدمات النظام البيئي للأراضي الرطبة ضرورية في نقطة ساخنة للتغير المناخي تتميز بنمو ديموغرافي وقوي ومناطق ساحلية مكتظة بالسكان ومتطورة بشكل كبير. ومن الضروري حماية واستعادة الأراضي الرطبة في منطقة البحر الأبيض المتوسط وتقليص تقلصت المساحة وتقلصت المساحات التي تحتلها الأراضي الرطبة بنسبة 10% في العقد الماضي بسبب الضغوط الكبيرة بما في ذلك التنمية الحضرية والسدود واستخراج المياه واستمرار الزراعة المكثفة وتربية الأحياء المائية والتلوث والأنواع الغازية في تهديد الأراضي الرطبة التي لا تزال موجودة. إن الأراضي الرطبة تلعب دورا مهما في معالجة الأزمات المتعددة التي نواجهها اليوم، ولا يمكن تحقيق التكيف مع آثار التغير المناخي ووقف فقدان التنوع البيولوجي وعكس اتجاهاته دون إنهاء فقدان الأراضي الرطبة واستعادة الأراضي الرطبة السابقة أو المتدهورة. في كوب 27 كان هناك إنجازا مهما ألا وهو صندوق الخسائر والأضرار الذي طلبته بشدة البلدان الأفريقية والنامية. نأمل من هذا الصندوق أن يستجيب بشكل مناسب لاحتياجات النظم البيئية لدينا بما في ذلك الأراضي الرطبة. وأيضا نتأمل من قرارات مهمة تقترن في كوب 15 حيث سيكون التنوع البيولوجي في بؤرة التركيز. ومع هذه الرسالة المهمة في الاعتبار والإنجازات اللي حققتها في اتفاقية رامسار، أنضم إلى زملائي وأشكر أمانة الاتحاد من أجل المتوسط في تعزيز فهم عميق لدور الأراضي الرطبة شكرا جزيلا. Thank you for your listening.
Many thanks, Mr. Al-Soud. Many thanks, Abdallah. Just request actually to the technicians. So there were somehow an overlap between the Arabic and English translation. Please make sure that the two are fixed. Thank you very much, Abdallah, for your words. I will now pass the floor to Ms. Katia Vrovic from the Ministry of Environment and Spatial Planning of Slovenia. And we will close our opening remarks and move to the next session. Please, Ms. Vrovic.
Thank you. Thank you, Alessandra. I hope you can hear me well.
Very well.
Okay, perfect. So good morning, and thank you for very meaningful interventions to my previous speakers, the Secretary General Al-Muntaz Abadi, Patrick Weigert, the presidency from the European Commission, and to Abdallah Al-Soud, the co-presidency from the Ministry of Environment from Jordan. And very good morning to all of you there. So I'm truly honored to have this opportunity to address you on the occasion of this important conference on restoration of Mediterranean wetlands as nature-based solutions for the benefit of nature, climate, and people. The Mediterranean, as you all know, is predicted to be one of the world's most affected regions by the negative impacts of climate change. It is a geographically diverse area, inhabited for millennia by different cultures. It is important maritime environment with vibrant economy and tourism. It also provides crucial transport links between Europe, Asia, and Africa. All these activities in turn create a big competition for land use and pressure on ecosystems, in particular wetlands. The quality of our lives in this region depends on well-preserved and healthy ecosystems. Wetlands are a crucial part thereof and a key nature-based solution. They provide answers for our endeavors to mitigate climate change and adapt to it. Slovenia has been an active member of MedWet from its very beginnings. We recognize the essential role regional cooperation plays in connecting people, sharing good practices and experience. The collaborative effort of the 27 Mediterranean countries of MedWet at Ramsar COP14 quite recently contributed to the adoption of the resolution, so-called nature-based solutions, or a resolution on the protection, conservation, restoration, sustainable use and management of wetland ecosystem in addressing climate change. And I believe our next speaker, Alessio Setta, will present this resolution in more detail. So at Ramsar COP14, it closed recently with 21 resolutions to advance wetlands action for people and nature. And the role of wetlands as nature-based solutions was reaffirmed also in the ministerial Wuhan Declaration at the high-level segment of Ramsar COP. Also very recently, as my previous speaker said already, in the cover decision of COP27, the United Nations Climate Change Conference, the critical role of protecting, conserving and restoring water systems and water-related ecosystems in delivering climate adaptation benefits and COP benefits was recognized. So wetlands have gained some attention. However, we need to push them higher on the political agenda. I wish you all a fruitful meeting and thank you for your attention.
Many thanks for your words, and indeed many thanks for linking and connecting indeed the technical with the political dimension. Indeed, this is what we are working on, and this is actually the progress that Mr. Sato will in a certain way synthesize in its next presentation. There is an important achievement, which is indeed the approval of the resolution on Mediterranean wetlands, as you mentioned, at COP14. So we will hear more about the building blocks and the steps forward in this respect. So Mr. Sata, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alessandra, and to the Union for the Mediterranean for this fantastic collaboration that we started more than 1 year ago. Let me start with some bad news, then to come to good news. That is the resolution. The degradation of wetlands is increasingly widespread, and biodiversity losses are continuing to rise, unfortunately, and also multiple sources of pollution, particularly from agriculture, continue to degrade our wetlands ecosystem. And also, last but not least, wetlands are impacted by climate change. Even if it was mentioned, we basically noted a very low attention to wetlands in the recent COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh. We believe there is more room, there must be more room for wetlands in this fight against climate change. We believe that a radical cultural change is needed. Our development model based on agriculture, industrial pollution, and sustained by fossil fuels is a failure. We have to admit it was a failure to find a way of living in harmony with nature. It's not coincidence that dominant worldviews in nature are separate from us as something else, a resource, assets, or capital. That was my feeling at the COP27. The fundamental problem is we have failed to address the underlying drivers of biodiversity and wetland loss. We have achieved, of course, several easy wins, but together, bigger challenges remain. So overcoming this will mean stopping activities that are the root of wetland loss. We need strong policies that prevent the destruction of primary habitats. We need radical action on climate change, which is expected to overtake other drivers to be the #1 cause of biodiversity loss in the coming years. The systemic changes require action from states and the private sector, but also citizens and consumers that can make the difference. We need to demonstrate the real value of nature to societies and the economy and present workable solutions that show that conservation makes a perfect sense. wetlands provide incredible benefits to humanity, but recognition and the scale of these benefits and the loss of degradation is relatively recent. Adaptation to the consequences of climate change and preventive measures are key challenges for society and ecosystems. So today, there are several opportunities to reinforce adaptation in the face of climate change. We need to shift our attention to practice, to more effective adaptation measures for the future based on nature. And in that sense, come to nature-based solution and what we call also in our resolution, wetland nature-based solutions. Protection, conservation, restoration, sustainable use, management of wetlands ecosystem are essential to mitigate climate change. For example, let's think about undisturbed peatlands or coastal blue carbon ecosystems like seagrass or salt marshes. These are exceptional, powerful sinks. Never forget that these are also significant sources of greenhouse gases if degraded or affected. This is the reason why we need to save wetlands for the future. The resolution 18.20 is really a first step. There was a recognition of the definition coming from UNEP, resolution 5 on the definition of nature-based solution. And also the Mediterranean and the application of this resolution in the Mediterranean has been considered as a model at the global level. That was a great achievement that what we are testing and developing in the Mediterranean became an example for the rest of the world. So we believe that we need to generate new ideas based on this for conservation, new energy, a new sense of purpose to save our wetlands. I believe there has never been a time in history when the chance for future is so critical. So please join us in this challenge of conserving wetlands, and please have a careful look to the next sessions in which we will introduce some of the outcomes of a UFM label project, which is called Wetland-Based Solution. We will focus on different aspects of wetland restoration. We will focus on knowledge and practice, governance, but also on communication and policy. So thank you again for this, and please, Alessandra, I give the floor back to you for more presentations.
Thanks, Alessio, for these important remarks, indeed, about also the way forward, attention to the practice, how to promote indeed nature-based solution more and more in the years to come. So, as you said, we will now move to the second session, to the results of the UFM label program, Wetland-Based Solution, indeed focusing on tools and achievements. This project was financed by MAVA, and I will now pass the floor to Mr. Wilnami from the Tour de Valade. The floor is yours.
Hello, good morning. I hope you can hear me well.
Very well, yes.
Okay, sorry, I cannot share the video with you because I have problems with my connection. So I will just share the presentation. I hope it's fine.
Please, your presentation is available, I think, so you can tell us when, you know, to change slides.
No, I will share the presentation. I will not put the video.
All right, okay, perfect.
Okay.
Can you share the presentation, please?
Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Anis Gelmame. I'm a project manager at the Research Institute for the Conservation of Mediterranean Wetlands of the Tour de Valade, based southern France. I work also with the Mediterranean Wetlands Observatory, which is the technical and the scientific tool for MedWet as well, and also for the Mediterranean countries to assess the status and trends of wetlands all around the Mediterranean basin. And today I will just give you some recent results about the assessment of potential wetlands to be restored in the Mediterranean basin, how we can identify them, and also how we can put priorities in terms of restoration actions at the large scale. So, as it was mentioned before, I will just give you some more figures about that, about the trends that we are observing at the Mediterranean scale regarding wetlands. So, during the last 4 decades, we lost almost half of the natural wetlands in the Mediterranean basin, and this assessment was conducted by the Mediterranean Wetlands Observatory, and also regarding the biodiversity, the Mediterranean Living Planet Index for freshwater species has decreased by 28% during the last 30 years or 25 years. We have also assessed, or we have also demonstrated that 36% of these species are threatened by extinction, more than the global and the Mediterranean, more than the global average, but also the other Mediterranean ecosystems. So you can see that freshwater ecosystems and so wetlands in general, biodiversity and habitats are more than the most threatened species and ecosystems in the Mediterranean basin. So wetlands restoration is under the spotlight because of all these threats and pressures, but also there is an increase in social and political demand. As you know, probably 2020 target 15, restoring 15% of degraded ecosystems. It's not achieved yet, and now we are targeting for 2030 even more ambitious targets for wetlands restoration or ecosystem restoration. And also there is an increased financial resources available to fund this restoration actions. So let's massively restore wetlands. So this is the signal that we are getting more and more from the demand, but also from the supply sides. However, there are still multiple challenges. Among other, the availability of ready to restore wetlands. We don't have a list, or we don't know where to put these efforts in terms of wetlands restoration. So we need to know or to identify where to restore wetland habitats. If these habitats, degraded or lost habitats, are still restorable, or could be the degradation could be reversible. Is there an ecological and biodiversity relevance to restore this ecosystems, and how we can assess this relevance? Is there a governance, a good local and national governance that could support, and also political support that could help for these restoration activities? The social acceptability at local scale especially, and the technical and scientific expertise. So all these criteria, so all these prerequisites are needed before starting thinking about restoration, wetlands restoration activities. So need to better matching, or to better match between the supply and the demand in terms of needs and urgency for wetlands restoration and conservation. So we think that we need to go step by step. And the first step that we have developed at the Mediterranean Wetlands Observatory is how to identify lost Mediterranean wetlands. So we've been talking about the trends at the beginning, and we saw that half of the wetlands have disappeared. The natural wetlands have disappeared during the last 4 decades. So how to identify those lost wetlands? So we based on different tools, especially tools derived from Earth observation techniques and methodologies. We can, for instance, identify potential wetlands areas. So this map at the pan-Mediterranean level shows area where existing and lost wetland could be found or could occur. So it's a probability map showing, and the higher probabilities show areas where wetland habitat could occur, so even lost wetland habitat. For example, here you have in southern Albania, the Maliki marshes that have been drained in the 50s and the 60s and converted into sugar beet field. So this lake could be identified based on this tool as a potential wetland area, but in the field it already has been transformed into intensive agricultural crops. So this is the one example of this lost wetland that could be identified based on this tool. Another example here in Turkey, you have this lake, Amir Lake, that have been converted, during the 60s and the 70s into irrigated crops, and also part of this lake have been transformed into an airport that has been built in 2007. So you can see that based on this tool, we can see where are the wetlands, not even the existing wetlands, but also wetlands that have been disappeared or totally transformed into other land use. So it comes now to the second step, how to estimate the needed effort for wetlands restoration based on this knowledge baseline that have been shown before. By crossing, for example, the two sources of information, the lost and the existing wetlands or the wetland probability area, with the current land use, for example, we can see Korean land cover for the European countries. So with the current land use and land cover maps, we can assess or estimate the needed effort to transform this, to restore this transformed wetlands. For example, if it was transformed into built-up areas, the cost will be much higher compared to other type of land use, like for example irrigated crops or pastures, etc. So based on this assessment, we can then show, especially with especially explicit data, with geo-reference data, where to restore, but also what are the needed efforts, an estimation of the needed effort to restore wetlands within this area. And this information could be also downscaled at the national level, but also at the local level, for example, at the river basin level. So here you have some examples, like in Spain with the Antella wetlands that have been also detected as lost wetlands, and you have on the right side the needed effort to transform or to restore this transformed wetland. The same example in this for this lake, Fucino Lake in Italy, or even we can also talk about this lake that have been drained in the 70s in Turkey, in southern Turkey, Lake Amik. So these two firsts are necessary but insufficient step. So we are not at the restoration yet. We are just identifying potential areas for restoration. So it's useful to provide numbers for regional and national restoration strategies and advocacy, etc., but insufficient to bring available funds for restoration actions on the ground. So there is a need to go into the ground and to see if these restoration activities are feasible or not. And we have also developed this green light for the Mediterranean wetlands restoration, which consists of adding two new steps or two additional steps. So the step 3 is by going to adding other knowledge and other layers and data for better prioritization of wetlands to be restored, like for example, biodiversity priority by assessing or crossing this maps with the key BAs, with the key biodiversity areas, with the protected areas, and also with other national strategies in terms of land management and water management, etc. And the step 4 is the socialize locally. So raising awareness, advocacy, capacity building with local NGOs and national NGOs, public participation until the restoration is ready to start. So as you can see, we are not yet there, but these steps are really important in order to have the regional picture at the Mediterranean level, but also to support local activities on the ground. So restoration is a social political practice as much as a scientific and a technical one. So thank you for your listening.
Many thanks, Anis, for this enlightening presentation, indeed, explaining in a very clear way, which are indeed the very important steps and points to be taken into account in order to launch this restoration exercise. So, of course, all these presentation will be made available, and thank you again for setting the scene for our, let's say, upcoming speakers. So we'll now move to Mr. Bose, Bruno Bose from MedWet. Please, the floor is yours. Try to keep it in the 5 minutes. Many thanks.
Yes, thank you, Alessandra, and good morning to everybody. I will share my screen. I hope all the technical aspects are working well. So just 5 minutes to summarize you a work just finished formally yesterday. So today is a perfect moment to start the new phase of promoting the tools produced by this 2 years project. This is the team, and this initiative was fully focused, Strategy 7, on supporting and providing a different tool for improving the application of restoration of wetland in the Mediterranean area. We produce a number of different tools. I will not enter on each of these, but I want to highlight some of them. What is important to underline is that we work in different directions. Many tools are focused on providing instruments for large scale and prioritization of wetland that, as we have seen in the previous intervention, is a key issue in this moment. It's important to restore, but it's also important to start restoration and to have a clear idea on which are the most good situation where start with restoration. So we have also provided a portfolio of potential wetland to be restored, and this is a method developed and applied to our wetland in our database, and we have a sort of prioritization wetland which are ready to be restored. This is another very interesting tool. Is a collection of fact sheet of previous examples of successful restoration, and not only the layout is good, but also the content, because there is a good description of all the results obtained, and in particular the lesson learned, the cost, all the technical aspect of this example, which can inspire for new restoration challenges. This is an app which works as an alert system. So every people who met problem in some wetland around the Mediterranean area can bring this in evidence and put this in evidence by using this app. And this data will be collected and could favor the collection of possible situation where to improve in future restoration. The strategy also focus on policy and advocacy, and I just want to mention that again, MedWet and the Union for the Mediterranean work together to produce this policy paper, which inspired some of the argument debated in the first part of this conference. And last but not least, we work a lot on awareness raising, in particular targeting people who have a role in restoring wetlands, so wetland manager, technicians, and other people involved. And it was not mainly a question of teaching something to someone, but it was mainly a question of discussing and sharing experience. We have a so different situation around the Mediterranean area that it's not possible to teach you. There is not a way to say you have to do this and this is the solution, but we have to discuss and like today to share experience. This is the best approach to improve our knowledges and our capability for wetland restoration. Anyhow, we produce also some concrete tools, and this is a preview of the handbook that is still not available, is under final edits and will be available soon. So all these tools are available in the website, in the platform of Wetland-Based Solution. We are very happy if you enter this platform and you start to download and to use this tool, because all this work makes sense only if it supports concrete intervention for restoration. So I have concluded. I hope to have provided you some highlights of this interesting 2 years work with the team.
Many thanks, Mr. Boss. Many thanks, Bruno. Indeed, very interesting. It's very clear what has been done very concretely over the past years. And of course, I mean, how we are not talking only of theory, but very much indeed of practice, as it was evocated even by Mr. Zatta just a few minutes ago. So the handbook is indeed a very important step forward. The links indeed with the policy paper. This reinforces also what Annie said just a few minutes ago. I mean, of course, the scientific technological dimension goes very closely hand in hand with the socio-political one. I will now move also to the next presentation from Mr. Hitzli from the Ministry of Environment, Urbanization and Climate Change of Turkey. So the floor is yours with your experience from the ground.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, no problem. Okay, first of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me for such a good workshop, and I would like to also say very good day for everyone. I will share my presentation since we have limited time. By the way, we have many different stories for the wetlands restoration, but since we have limited time, I will just give one example of them. But sorry.
You have a presentation?
I have a presentation, but just waiting for the sharing
the screen. I don't know if we can help on our end.
Just few seconds, I think.
Okay.
If you share for me, I will be very pleased. Actually,
it's working
okay.
now. Otherwise, we share it for you.
Okay. Now you can go to the next slide.
Yes, we can see the slides.
Okay. So our area is Elmalı Lake. It is in Antalya province. It was very important lake before dried, and it was in a district. The name is district is Elmalı, which means is apple full, so many apple. So it has also altitude with 1,000 meters, and it had area as 850 hectares. So the region had one of the most qualitative apple production center of the Turkey before the lake dried, and it was the 35% of the total production of the country was produced in that area. Also, many different products also harvested. For example, beet, which doubled the average of Turkey, was harvested in Elmalı. Also, the wheat yield of 500 kilos per decade. Next slide, please. But because of the pressure of the local people, it was right for to gain more agricultural lands, actually, between 1970s and 1980s. To dry the lake, a 5 kilometers, about 5 kilometers long tunnel was built to dry lake. And it was a very hard procedure, and it took 10 years to dry lake completely because the lake was very, very big and the water sources were very good. So it take 10 years to dry. But after lake dried, also there was one more facility that is about 3 kilometers long highway also was built in the middle of the lake. But after drying of lake, people understand that it is not correct. It is not good for them. For example, before it was dried, underground water emerged from 5 or 6 meters. But after it is dried, it can be found from 70 or 80 meters. Also, precipitation was decreased. Before drying, it was about 800 millimeters, but unfortunately, it decreased to 400 millimeters. After the lake rebuilt or reconstructed, it only increased to 590 millimeters. So we couldn't achieve the original values. Also, the period of frost extended from 63 days to 71 days. Also, we faced with another important problem, that cheddar leaf butterflies, whose population is controlled by migratory birds by feeding, has increased, and the cheddar trees have started to dry out. So also there are many different problems we have faced with after drying the lake. We can change the slide. Yeah, thank you. But after those bad situations, the villagers understand the importance of the lake, and the villagers of the Elmalı district, also including the villagers whose land has distributed, were collected 3,000 signatures for the restoring area. So finally, local people would like to get back their wetland. So drainage canals and tunnel was closed at 2004, and the lake has begun to collect water, and also highway was closed and turned to artificial islands for the birds. But we can change to the slide. Oops. But we, in 2020s, we have get our lake back, but we couldn't achieve the original lake and its beneficiaries because maybe it will never possible to get the original lake, but the newly created Avlan Lake still rehydrates its groundwater. It will soften the climate of the region, and we are trying to create a new wetland ecosystem there in the area. So that is my short information and short presentation for the participants, and I'd like to thank you, and thank you for listening to me.
Many thanks, Mr. Hidsley. Actually, the message is passed very loud and clear. Very important experience also that you showed to us. Very interesting conclusions. Also, maybe the ecosystem will not be restored as it was before, but indeed, I mean, there is a new future, a new perspective actually coming in. So with this, of course, our race against time is starting. We are starting to collect some delays. Let's move now to the next session on governance with a focus on the local scale. So I will now pass the floor, the moderation for the session related, let's say, to the wetland champion region to my colleague Georgie Fuharets from CPRM. So Georgie, the floor is yours. And many thanks for being with us here today.
Thank you very much, Alessandra. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Let me share my screen. Okay, so thank you very much for the invitation. I am Jordi Juarez, and I am Project and Policy Officer at the CPMR, concretely under the Inter-Mediterranean Commission. So for those who doesn't know about the CPMR, we bring together about 150 regions from the European Union and beyond. And we are organized in 6 geographical commissions. I am here representing the Inter-Mediterranean Commission, which brings 40 Mediterranean regions in 8 countries. And we are in relation with many key stakeholders of the region, of the Mediterranean, in close collaboration with key stakeholders such as the Union for the Mediterranean, the WestMed initiative, MedWet, and many others. We are concretely a platform for technical and political cooperation between regional authorities on priority issues and policies for the peripheral maritime regions, such as territorial cohesion, maritime affairs, transport, and accessibility. But we also work on migration, climate and energy, sustainable tourism, and many others. So what we do concretely at practical level, we do some advocacy initiatives. We promote best practices. Most of them arise from our projects. We also work as a think tank activity, conference. We organize conference and seminars, capacity building actions, and we also involve our young. So to achieve our actions, the Inter-Mediterranean Commission has identified 4 strategic axes around which we develop our reflections and activities. Those are the promoting a macro-regional and sea-basin strategy in the Mediterranean, boosting the blue economy, sustainability and cohesion, mobilizing the Mediterranean youth, and also promoting a Mediterranean of projects and mobilize the Mediterranean southern partners. So we are organized to achieve these axes and to make sure that they are implemented. We have 4 working groups. We have one which is territorial cooperation and macro-regional strategies, water and energy, economic and social cohesion, and transport and integrated maritime policy. Just a few words on the project, because we have here with us today Daniel Durmalai, that will be presenting more in detail some of the results of this project when it comes to wetlands. We have the biodiversity protection community, which is a project that, it's the phase 2 of an old project, a former project called Panacea, for the communication and capitalization of projects involved in protected areas for the protection of biodiversity in the Mediterranean. And we have developed several tools that are interesting for our session today. We have our knowledge platform that gathers a lot of tools. It's like a digital library of resources. We also have some reports, mapping and assessment of the state of wetlands, catalog of tools, including wetlands and many others. So concretely, I'm going now into the point of my intervention. Is the network of wetland champion regions. So this is a group of champion Mediterranean regions that are committed to wetland conservation and restoration as nature-based solutions to climate and environmental crises. So we are organized and it's coordinated by CPMR, the Union for the Mediterranean, and the MedWet. And it's involving mainly Mediterranean regions, but also other key actors. So our main objectives, you can see here, it's enhance public and policymaker awareness on wetlands conservation and restoration. We also aim at upscaling knowledge and promote solutions relevant to Mediterranean wetlands, also influencing regulatory and decision-making processes at local, national, and regional level, and developing a joint fundraising strategy. So our main activities are now ongoing, setting up a dedicated web platform. We are also aiming at organizing site visits and exchange of knowledge, organizing events to promote good practices and sustainable solution, constantly monitoring, identifying, and suggesting relevant EU regional goals for joint projects to have this funding that is very necessary, and also facilitation of the private sector engagement as a contributor to nature-based solutions development. So the network of the basic principles of the network are that regional or local policy, legislative, or other appropriate measures and regulatory instruments. We also have restoration and creation of wetlands that include spatial planning and integrated regional management, principles of inclusivity, empowerment, and participation of indigenous and local community, raised levels of public awareness, and also share lessons learned and good practices. So this was the main idea of the network, and we have today with us representative of Región de Murcia and Région Sud. And well, I guess I have to introduce them. Alessandra, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, please.
Yes, please. You can introduce the two regions. Thank you.
Let me just stop sharing my screen so you can see my face. Okay, perfect. So we have here with us today Maria Huertas, who is from the region of Murcia, and she will be talking about wetland conservation in the region of Murcia through multi-stakeholders cooperation in the Life Salinas project. And then we will have Olivier Narbonne from Région Sud, who will be talking about the renaturization of large wetland Plan de la Gare. So I guess Maria Huertas is here with us. I can see you. So please, I give you the floor. Thank you. Yeah, we can hear you well, Maria.
Okay, hello. I am sharing my screen. Can you see it?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. So thanks for giving Life Salinas project the opportunity to be presented in this conference. My name is Maria Huertas. I work in Eurovertice Consultores. We have supported this project in its drafting and implementation. And I will explain the contribution of Life Salinas to wetlands conservation. It can be considered an example of a small-scale restoration. Life Salinas has been funded under the Nature and Biodiversity strand of the LIFE program. It has been run from 2018 to 2022. It has finished this September. And it has been located in the salt marshes of San Pedro del Pinatar in the region of Murcia in southeast Spain. These salt flats are a site of community importance and a special protection area for birds. So they are part of the Natura 2000 network. And they are also wetland of international importance according to the Ramsar Convention. They are located between the Mar Menor Lagoon and the Mediterranean Sea and has 856 hectares of land. This environment has been shaped by humans because of the condition for salt production. The project has two objectives. On one side, the conservation of Idle-winged wool, and on the other side, the restoration of two priority habitats, the Mediterranean salt steppes and coastal dunes. The partnership is an example of multi-stakeholder cooperation for conservation. It has been formed by Salinera Española, coordinating beneficiary. It is the company exploiting the salt flats. Also the region of Murcia with the General Directorate for Nature. They have carried out a huge environmental education campaign. The University of Murcia on the academic side, making the monitoring of conservation actions. ANSE, which is the largest environmental NGO in the region and that was in charge of habitats restoration and volunteering. The municipality of San Pedro del Pinatar, where the protected area is located, they have been collaborating in communication and supporting conservation actions. And finally, MAVA, Portuguese partners, who has developed a certificate for Natura 2000 sites. Well, the main conservation action has been the construction of salt levees that were previously demonstrated as nesting habitat for water birds, all protected by the Annex 1 of the Birds Directive. Just in 2022, 240 pairs of Idle-winged wool colonized 1,850 meters of the new dikes created. But also some more pairs of birds of importance under the Birds Directive. The project has also worked in the restoration of 2 hectares of dunes. ANSE has installed a fence to avoid trampling and a barrier made of Posidonia oceanica banquets, so to stop dunes erosion. The municipality of San Pedro has collaborated in the provision and transport of Posidonia oceanica banquets placed in other sites of the coast. ANSE has also installed 500 sand collectors whose orientation and construction have been made with the supervision of the University of Murcia. For habitats restoration, they have planted more than 16,000 plants and eliminated up to 68 tons of invasive alien species. The municipality and Salinera Española has also contributed with the retrieval of invasive alien species with machinery and personal resources. And finally, to raise awareness on the project objectives, the region of Murcia has developed an environmental campaign having as target audience primary and secondary students, park visitors and workers, and more than 300 activities have been developed with more than 4,500 people participating. So this is just a small presentation of the project. As I said, it just finished this September, but if you want to have some information, here is the website of the project where you can download all the deliverables and reports elaborated in the project.
Thank you very much, Maria, for sharing this impressive work that has been carried out within this live project in Salinas. So I'll give now the floor to Olivier Nalbon. So please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Oui, bonjour à tous. Merci pour votre invitation. Alors, je me partage. C'est bon, vous voyez? Est-ce que vous voyez la présentation?
Oui, oui, oui.
Okay,
pas
très bien.
Merci.
Voilà. Donc, je suis Olivier Nalbon, je travaille au Conseil régional Sud Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur au service de l'eau et des risques naturels. Et donc, avant de vous présenter le projet de renaturation du plan de la Garde, je voulais juste présenter succinctement la politique de la région en matière de gestion des zones humides. Donc, juste pour dire que les multiples inventaires qui ont eu lieu dans la région ont permis d'identifier plus de 3000 zones humides dans la région. Alors, on a des grandes zones humides qui sont pour la plupart gérées et bien protégées, mais on a surtout beaucoup de petites et de moyennes zones humides qui, elles, sont soit menacées, soit déjà dégradées. Et c'est pour ça que la région a souhaité inscrire dans son schéma régional de développement durable du territoire un objectif de préservation et de restauration des zones humides. Et donc, pour accompagner en fait les territoires qui se doivent de respecter cet objectif, pour les accompagner à mettre en œuvre les projets de préservation et de restauration, nous avons adopté un cadre d'intervention qui permet de soutenir les projets. Donc, ce cadre d'intervention financier, il permet de soutenir les projets selon 3 axes. Donc, un axe en matière d'amélioration de la connaissance pour financer des études, des inventaires, des plans de gestion stratégiques. Un axe très fort en termes de travaux de restauration des zones humides, et puis un axe au niveau de la sensibilisation et la communication. Alors, c'est assorti de moyens financiers qui sont pas à la hauteur de l'ensemble des besoins au niveau régional, mais qui contribuent quand même avec un budget de l'ordre de 2,7 millions d'euros par an pour financer des projets sur la biodiversité aquatique, des cours d'eau et des zones humides. Et puis la région gère aussi le budget régional du FEDER qui est destiné à financer ce type de projet. Alors, je souhaitais vous présenter un projet qui est assez vitrine, on va dire, à l'échelle régionale. C'est le projet de renaturation du plan de la Garde qui a été mis en œuvre par le maître d'ouvrage était le département du Var. Donc, on est sur une zone humide de 135 hectares en zone périurbaine, donc à proximité de la ville de Toulon qui est aussi qui approche les 200 000 habitants. C'est un site qui faisait l'objet de pressions extrêmement fortes, une pression foncière, avec notamment des velléités de construction, bien qu'on soit en zone inondable, des dégradations multiples, un tassement du sol, un assèchement en fait de la zone humide, une fréquentation anarchique, un certain nombre de bâtiments dégradés, délabrés. Alors, j'ai pas de photos de cette époque. Le site est traversé en fait par un fleuve qui était lui aussi complètement chenalisé et qui ne jouait plus son rôle, qui n'avait plus aucune fonctionnalité, qui débordait lors des crues. De ce fait, la population en fait était complètement privée de cet espace de nature. Et puis, bien évidemment, les multiples inventaires qui ont eu lieu ont permis de déterminer qu'il y avait une biodiversité extrêmement forte sur le site, mais bien évidemment menacée du fait de ces pressions. Donc, le projet a consisté à préserver la richesse écologique du site de manière durable vis-à-vis de l'urbanisation et de l'ouvrir au public. Alors, c'est un projet de grande ampleur, donc déjà par sa dimension géographique, même si on a vu précédemment des sites encore bien plus grands. Donc, je l'ai dit, 135 hectares. Une ampleur temporelle, puisque les premières réflexions pour ce projet ont démarré en 2004. Suivi de multiples réunions de concertation, d'études. Et les premiers coups de pelle ont été donnés en 2015 avec une fin des travaux en 2020. C'est un projet qui a mis plus de 15 ans à se mettre en place. Mais c'était le gage d'une réussite à la fois technique et en matière de concertation. Et ampleur aussi financière, puisque c'est un projet qui a nécessité plus de 20 millions d'euros d'investissement, financé en partie par le FEDER et l'Agence de l'eau. Donc, le premier enjeu qu'il fallait résoudre, c'était l'enjeu écologique. Donc, pour cela, il a été nécessaire, en fait, de redonner l'espace de liberté au fleuve qui était complètement chenalisé et de le connecter au milieu humide. Donc, en fait, le lit du fleuve a été élargi, les pentes des berges ont été adoucies. Des grandes dépressions humides ont été créées et reconnectées à cet ensemble. Et donc, en fait, les résultats ont été très rapidement positifs. La flore préservée qui était cantonnée à quelques petits espaces sur le site s'est très rapidement étendue. Et puis, en termes d'avifaune, les inventaires avant travaux notaient 89 espèces présentes sur le site et environ 200 espèces après travaux. Donc, assez rapidement, la faune et la flore a vite recolonisé le site. Le deuxième enjeu qui était au cœur aussi du projet, c'est les services rendus à la population. Donc, en particulier, le fait que le fleuve reconnecté à ces milieux humides puisse jouer son rôle de zone d'expansion de crues et permet effectivement aujourd'hui de tamponner notamment les crues automnales. Et puis, bien évidemment, là aussi, avec le changement climatique qu'on connaît tous, on est déjà en région méditerranéenne chaude, et donc on a besoin d'îlots de fraîcheur. Et ce site-là ne jouait assez peu ce rôle. Et le fait d'avoir recréé des milieux qui sont en eau de manière permanente toute l'année permet de créer des îlots de fraîcheur à proximité des villes. Et troisième axe, là aussi crucial dans le développement du projet, c'était la vocation sociale d'accueil du public, en fait, avec des liaisons douces qui ont été créées. Il y a près de 16 km de sentiers qui ont été créés sur le site, des jardins familiaux, des jardins pédagogiques, et puis également une maison de la nature qui a été créée, alors sur pilotis, hors zone inondable bien évidemment, qui permet de sensibiliser l'ensemble de la population à la préservation du site. Voilà, je vous remercie de votre attention, j'en ai terminé.
Merci Olivier d'avoir partagé avec nous les résultats de ces projets de renaturisation de la zone humide de Pan de la Garde. Donc, I will switch now to English and I will give back the floor to Alessandra. So thank you very much for your attention for this session.
Many thanks, Jordan. Many thanks, of course, to the Murcia-Pacar region for this impressive, indeed, presentation, and I would say also inspiring cases. So, closing, let's say, this part, this focus, let's say, on the local focus, which, however, it's crucial, as we see, because of the engagement at all level of local authorities and stakeholders into wetlands conservation and restoration. We now move to the presentation from Tour de Balat from Ms. Lisa Ernol on the use of voluntary environmental contracts for wetland governance. You have the floor for minutes. Thank you very much.
Okay, can you see my screen and hear me okay?
We can, of course.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to begin just by thanking you very much for this opportunity to speak today. I think this is an excellent chance to share a little bit of the experiences that we've had here in the European Mediterranean region. And I'm going to really highlight some of the work that we've done on wetland governance. The work that I'm going to talk about today is based on two different Interreg projects, WetNet and TUNUP. And then we also capitalize through the project Waterlands. So the first thing that is really important to highlight is that there's been past studies showing that there is a direct correlation between the protection status, the governance models, and bird trends. And this correlation shows the important role of effective governance can play in wetland conservation. So without effective governance, we can often see that the wetlands are degraded or destroyed. So we need to really take into account the wetland governance and see how we can be most effective in ensuring the governance so that we can conserve the sites and then, if necessary, of course, restore. So the different, there's many different wetland governance schemes that can be used, but the one I'm going to talk about today are voluntary environmental contracts. So voluntary environmental contracts are negotiated environmental agreements that really incite active participation of different stakeholders for the implementation of management plans. They can be river management plans, or they can be wetland plans, they can be protected marine areas. But the idea is really to bring the different stakeholders together to develop a common vision for the site. There are tools that promote the implementation of participatory planning, and it goes beyond just the planning into the real management of the sites. So they invoke collaborative discussions between both public and private stakeholders, which is really important to highlight. And it integrates the different expertise and perceptions of the stakeholders to find common ground for action and commitments. So with these voluntary environmental contracts, the idea is to reduce the conflict around the wetlands and to really start to work together to have a common idea of where we want to go and how we can get there. So they are negotiated agreements between stakeholders. They are not, they're not in the administrative tools, and they have no legal binding, but they have a moral obligation of the different stakeholders who are involved in the process. So we did a study to see which European Mediterranean Ramsar sites are involved in voluntary contracts. And what we saw was that out of the 231 Ramsar sites in the 12 Mediterranean European countries, 75% or over 75% did have management plans, which is very, very great. But only 65 of these have environmental contracts. So what we can see is that some of the sites, although they do have management plans, the management plans might not be effectively managed or implemented because the different stakeholders are not involved in the process. And then some of these sites, of course, have financial issues or conflicting issues that prevent the proper implementation of the management plans. We also saw in the study that although there are 65 voluntary contracts, which seems like a nice amount, about 45% of them come from two countries, France and Italy. So it's a tool that's been quite generalized in both of these countries, in France and Italy. But on this graphic, you can see that we've tested it in many other European Mediterranean countries, but the use is still quite limited. So after testing the environmental contract in the other countries, we came up with some different recommendations I'd like to share with you today. First of all, the voluntary contracts fit very well into the EU legal framework, whether it be the Habitat Directive, the Water Directive, and they're real governance tools that can be used with a flexible approach. So they're not concrete structures that need to be adapted without any flexibility, but they can really change and adapt it to each of the local context within the EU framework. And within the EU framework, these voluntary contracts also can find some different funding opportunities, either regionally, locally, or nationally. But we also would like to stress that the process requires a specific organization with competent bodies. It's not something that can just be done within a month and be put into place. It's a long-term process that requires a coordinator, a board, a technical committee, and a secretariat to really ensure that the different stakeholders can continue in the process and that the different activities are monitored and controlled over time. And following up on this, it's also important to highlight the need for a specific budget dedicated to the governance processes. A lot of the times within the life of different projects, we can see that they're funded, whether they be management or restoration projects, they can be funded for a short term, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And after that, the governance process is often neglected because of the lack of funding. So these are processes that require middle to long-term funding over time to really be effective. And what we had tested in the past was in management projects, but we also feel, and we have tested it here in the Camargue on a restoration site for the former salt works of the Camargue. And these voluntary contracts can also be used as a tool to help initiate the new restoration activities, which create a common vision for the site and can determine where we want to go with these restoration activities.
Thanks, Lisa, for your presentation and for highlighting indeed the importance of the environmental contract as governance tools. And we now move and complete the session on governance with a presentation from Vanya Fatsu from the MedC and with the focus on the coastal wetlands contract. Please, the floor is yours, Vanya.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for the invitation. I will present a concrete example of the coastal wetland contract. Secondly, the new governance model has been very crucial to promote the adoption of nature-based solutions in the Maristanis area. The Maristanis project focused on the 6 Ramsar sites in the Gulf of Oristano in Sardinia, Italy. It's a hotspot area for biodiversity, but also for climate change. The absence of an integrated governance system and the lack of management impeded to tackle with the several challenges that was negatively affected the area when the project started. The coastal wetland contract has been identified through a participatory process as the most suitable tool to address and solve these issues. The Coastal Wetland Contract is a shared commitment act among public and private subjects involved in the governance of the wetland systems in different capacities. The collaboration among the public and private actors aim at integrate the complementary interests present around it through the definition of responsibility and the implementation of tools for the governance and sustainable management of the wetlands. The Coastal Wetland Contract is officially recognized by the Italian legislation, and it consists in a 4-attribute tool. The Coastal Wetland Contract is characterized by a voluntary entry, the openness because all the subjects with a relevant interest for wetland governance can join it, with a negotiated exit, and all members are called to collaborate actively in the formulation and implementation of the joint decisions. And it also includes contractual commitments subject to negotiation processes. The Coastal Wetland Contract was defined following a 2-stage methodology. The first stage, the preparatory stage, is basically an in-depth context analysis that focuses on regulatory framework, stakeholder analysis, and the scientific description of the wetlands. This phase preceded the second phase, the implementation stage, that focuses on the participatory process, and in a scenario planning phase, during which all the measure was specified through a negotiation process that lead to the Coastal Wetland Contract. That means that lead to an improved governance model and system set in the area. The Maristanis Coastal Wetland Contract specifically aims at achieving 6 strategic objectives: an integrated governance strategy common to all the 6 Ramsar wetlands, which are Ramsar sites, but also Natura 2000 sites, a single institutionally recognized coordination body, an improved environmental quality for the wetlands and the coastal marine waters in front of the coastal wetlands, an enhanced cultural, historical, and landscape value, and innovative models for the production of all the goods that are made in the area among the agricultural, fishing, and tourism sectors. From the 6 objectives that I just mentioned, was creating an action plan that is based on 7 strategic axes: territorial governance and capacity building, improvement of the ecological status of water system, the protection of the biodiversity and natural capital, which are the main axis, landscape rehabilitation and enhancement of cultural heritage, green and blue economy, resilience to climate change, and environmental communication education. Until now, the Maristanis Coastal Wetland Contract was really effective in attract financial resources. 41% of actions are totally or partially funded for almost 10 million. 62% of this amount is addressed to nature-based solutions that aim at improve water status, and 33% of this amount is addressed to nature-based solutions that aim at restore habitats and ecosystems. Thank you.
I'm very sorry, I was still muted. Vanya, many thanks actually for this presentation and for showing how this partnership between the public and private sector is indeed important and necessary. I mean, to carry out successfully these wetlands conservation or restoration actions. So we focus on knowledge and practice, now on governance. We are now moving to communication and public awareness. Sana, the floor is yours. 4 minutes, thanks.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Do you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Sanem Zouri. I'm the network officer of MedWet. I would like to thank UFM for this opportunity. Today, I will share with you some information about our new network, the Mediterranean Ramsar Sites Network. So to give you a little bit of a context, we have today 194 coastal Ramsar sites in the Mediterranean region. And we feel that there is growing need to adapt policies and to implement action on the ground. So we thought together as the Ramsar community and the MedWet community is that we need to work more closely with wetland managers because they have a key role to play on the ground. And in order to support them, MedWet has created the Mediterranean Ramsar Site Manager Network, which is a membership network of wetland managers dedicating to fostering to best management practices, knowledge exchange, and public education about wetland values and services. So what is the added value of this network? The network is set up as a share and learn network. Managers can benefit from knowledge sharing platform, capacity building program. For example, this year we had more than 5 webinars about different topics such as wetland restoration, inventories, ecosystem services, etc. We also push them to have advocacy action for site conservation and wise use. We also try to set up programs of training between Mediterranean Ramsar sites and also work together on guidelines on sustainable use practices of wetlands. So how did this adventure started? So this adventure started in 2018 when we approved this initiative in the last, in the previous Ramsar COP in Dubai. And despite the sanitary situation, today we have a network of 46 members around the Mediterranean. So this is like the last, some of the picture of our last event in Azraq. This event gathered some managers from the Mediterranean with some donors. So it was a really good opportunity to share about experiences on wetland restoration on the ground. And it is very easy to be a member of this network. It's really without management fees. You just have to fill an application form to join this network and to benefit from the value of this network. And I would like to share with you our website. The website is medwetmanagers.net. And thank you.
Many thanks, Sana. Indeed, an important call for joining the network. So along the lines of, you know, the current focus on communication and public awareness, I'll pass the floor to Maria Jose Viñals of the University of Valencia. Please, Maria, the floor is yours.
Good morning to everybody. Let me to share the screen with you. Can you see the screen, please?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. I try to put in full. Okay, perfect. Then I would like to talk about the role of the maps in the communication awareness framework, and then I will present this project founded by the Ministry of the Spanish Ministry of Environment in relation to the realization of these maps for visitors in wetlands. These maps were made in agreement with the Ramsar Secretariat for using the logo of the Ramsar Convention. and then I will present you I want to present the principles on which these maps are based. That means that we are using the interpretation, heritage interpretation principles from Morgan Tilden's, and then the statement in what Tilden based the interpretation, heritage interpretation is understanding, then through understanding appreciation of the heritage, and through appreciation protection. That statement was made by Freeman Tilden in 1957, and then from that period, many interpretation programs and many tools has been made following these principles. Then here, focusing more in maps, you have here the steps that we have followed in the realization of these maps. First of all, and more important, is data sourcing, is to collect all the information in relation with wetlands, values, and activities, everything about the sites, the wetland sites. That is the more important step in the elaboration of these maps. Then our audience is always general public. It's not a map for expert people on wetlands. If not for the general public, because it's most of visitors of a wetland are general public, and we need to increase awareness of this audience. Then other important thing was to design graphic style and other components of the map, and that was made at the beginning of the collection of the maps. And we have a manual with the styling of the maps. Then a very important thing, all the maps have interpretative messages. We have identified the main idea, the main message, the main theme of each map, and we focus all the presentation in this idea.
Maria, you have 1 more minute, huh?
Sorry, okay. We zoom in focal areas or region, and then it's easy because I want to show you what kind of maps we are doing. You have here la Laguna de Fuente de Piedra in Málaga, Spain. You have in a face of the map the trails and activities and the legend with the important attractions and the facilities. And in the other side of the map, you have an illustration with the more important habitats and subhabitats to highlight. Here you have examples. This is in Spain. This is in Tunisia. This is Gar el Mela Lagoon. This is made in French. You have here in highlighting the illustration. Then cultural issues are always highlighted too in the wetlands they have, and the history. You have here the Laguna de Marjal of Pego Oliva in Spain. It's a coastal lagoon too. You have here the illustration in the first ground. You have here the estuary of the Tejo in Lisbon, Portugal. You have here the illustration in the other face of the map. You have here the recent one that is Albufera of Valencia, that was presented in the last COP in Geneva. And you have here the trails, and you have here the illustration, and you have here the draft, the first draft for the illustration that we have prepared. And here you have the elements that compound the map. There is for the one side of the map, you have the legend of attractions, services, and facilities. You have the recommendations for visit, code of ethics, activities, and the basic data about the wetland. And then in the other side, that is the illustration, you have always we include the easy verse to see the interpretation themes, some block diagrams for habitats and subhabitats, the credits of the map because it's a map with ISBN, and some information about the origin of the wetland, the history, and so on. And then this is we are finishing now this map in Jordan for the Azraq Oasis, and then we are now preparing the part of the trails and attractions and so on. And we have practically finished the part of the illustration. And this map was very laborious because we need to redesign all the satellite image because it's not in good quality for the format. And then we devote a lot of time in preparing the satellite image, but we're practically finishing. And for the next year, we are preparing one other map in an inland wetland in Spain and another one in a Mediterranean country. Probably will be Lebanon, but it's not still confirmed. And thank you very much.
Many thanks, Maria Jose. Impressive maps. I have a question for you very, very quickly. How long it takes to produce the maps for each site and the needed data? Flash reply?
How many times? How much time?
How long it takes, indeed?
1 year, more or less. But it's not. We are not devoted full time.
Okay.
You know, we are doing other things. But in 1 year, because we need to review many times the draft.
Many thanks, Maria Jose. Indeed, impressive maps. I will now move to Dania Abdul Malak. Many thanks, Dania, for being with us. The floor is yours with the Mediterranean wetland ecosystem knowledge base. Thank you.
Yes, good morning, and thank you a lot for the invitation, Alessandra. I'll share my screen, just a second. Just let me know if you see it correctly.
We do.
Yes, okay, very well. Okay, so yes, good morning, everyone, and thank you a lot for the invitation. I'm the director of the European Topic Center on Spatial Analysis and Synthesis, but also I'm the coordinator of this Mediterranean Biodiversity Protection Community that was previously mentioned by our colleague Jordi. So the work I would like to present today is part of this initiative and also of a very broad collaboration in the Mediterranean that was really very timely. The work we have done is mainly to develop a Mediterranean-wide knowledge base that is comparable to mainly support informed decision. I'm trying to move my slides. Okay, now, very well. So the work has been has come in a moment where there was an important knowledge gap in the Mediterranean about wetland ecosystems and mainly the location of wetland ecosystems in the Mediterranean. We had an opportunity because we had a very good network of collective expertise. You can see the people that contributed to the work, the different institutions. Sorry, my screen has different elements. I'm not able to see the whole thing. But anyway, in the publication that I just shared with you, you can see that has been a collaborative work, including Tour du Vala, that have presented, our colleague Anis, MedWet, certainly the Greek Biotope Wetland Center, some very relevant results from the Medis West project, Plan Bleu as colleagues as well and partners in this Mediterranean Biodiversity Protection Community, and certainly MedWet with also the task force on advocacy that we have been contributing to the last few years. Certainly we have had the right also, I would say, principles to develop such an important knowledge base, the hydroecological principles that are a very important starting point to address when it comes to wetlands, the evidence and the knowledge sharing that have been particularly important, especially in the Mediterranean. There is an issue of sharing knowledge, sharing data, validated and important data that is a bit scattered everywhere. So there was a very interesting collaboration in that sense. And we had an effective use of funding, and we had the opportunity to have the Mediterranean Interreg Med program that has funded such a work. So thank you to everyone. Many of you are available here today for this impressive collaboration. So out of really very important momentum, while we were addressing important elements, we gathered all our efforts, building on the Ramsar Convention's principles when it comes to wetlands in terms of their definition, their delineation, and so on, ensuring these important discussions about comparative approaches and methods for the northern, that is normally more data rich in terms of the knowledge, and the southern part of the Mediterranean, the combination of impressive element of knowledge on global, continental, regional data coming from the land cover, coming from remote sensing. Anis priorly also mentioned a bit these tools and their importance in such assessments, and certainly addressing the importance of the accuracy of data that is normally an issue. Anyway, so very shortly, the method has been, you can see it, and I will share the presentation with all of you. It has been going through many sources of data, join them together in a meaningful way, and ensure that we have a robust approach for the Mediterranean and for the southern and eastern side of the Mediterranean. And also this work and this methodology was compared to the richer part of the Mediterranean in terms of data and approaches. And we developed on the very important work that we were part of the SMICE, the Mapping and Assessing Ecosystem and Ecosystem Services. That has been a joint effort with the European Environment Agency, DG Environment, the Joint Research Center, and other important, I would say, European institutions, that we developed a robust methodology to assess all ecosystems in Europe. So the wetland part of it that we have been engaged with, we used it as a basis to compare the north and the south. So this comes from also prior work. Anyway, very briefly, we have now a Mediterranean-wide knowledge base that is comparable. This is the first time that we have something like that. It is spatial, so we have the spatial side of things. We have open access to the data. These are very important, I think, novelties that we need to be aware of. We know now a proximal extent of the wetlands across the Mediterranean region. You can see how much complexity the work has, 11,500 features, 23 different input databases. We now have, as I mentioned, the full coverage of the Mediterranean basin. These are very important inputs for transboundary management and to have a comprehensive outlook. Part of the assessment of the wetland extent, you can see there is still differences between the level of knowledge from north and south, but this is a baseline to be improved in the future. When it comes to the biodiversity linked to wetlands, we have gone into a huge amount of information coming from the IUCN Red List assessment, and have gone into more than 1,700 selected endemic species to understand what is their status. And the results, nothing new. They show that there is a huge amount, so more than or around 50% of the endemic species are under threat, which is really massive. Most importantly, I think that now we can locate the threatened species that are endemic, which are a very high priority for restoration. So we have evidence also in terms of where to zoom in terms of the restoration. We have identified hotspots for the relative threat of biodiversity. We know now the areas that have the highest share of endemic and threatened species, and certainly these are very important areas to ensure prioritization and restoration. We also have developed all this knowledge to make it accessible and open source into a geoportal that I shared the link to, that you can see, view, zoom in, extract statistics, and download the information, which is really key for the future.
Thank you, Dan.
So take-home messages. I think there is need still to further ensure that data is improved in the future whenever we get access to better data. That's an invitation for everyone that has better data to share them with us. We're more than happy to be updating regularly such a common database. Conservation and restoration needs, they differ greatly between countries, as does the availability of information. So two important points as take-home messages. For the first time, we have this common Mediterranean knowledge-wise database. We would need to really ensure that this is used as a basis for decisions and for action. And certainly we need to urgently reinforce the advocacy work through policy implementation, and certainly have an uptake as willingness to act for our politicians. Thank you so much. I think that's it from my
Many
side.
thanks.
Definitely
minutes. Very interesting and very important messages. And indeed, I mean, you showed this impressive collaboration also at community level, biodiversity level in the Mediterranean. And of course, this is very much taken into account. Unfortunately, we're running late. We still have some speakers. So for everybody to be able to talk, please take into account your time slot. We will have somehow to run fast. Chantal, the floor is yours with the impacts from and solution to sea level rise. Please.
Thank you. And I know we are running late. It's not going to be easy to say everything in such a short amount of time. I'm Chantal Mena. I'm a communications consultant, and more specifically, I've collaborated over the last 3 years with MedWet on the project communications on anything that was related to wetland-based solutions. I'm going to introduce you to one of the tools we developed. We've developed many of them, but this is probably the one that we think is going to be more impactful. So we have a big challenge as MedWet, but also as communicators in general. We've seen over the last years, I've been in environmental communications for more than 15 years. And for all this time, we were talking a lot about reports, statements, communicating to media, warning about how the trouble could come and could be. But now everything has changed. I mean, we're in the middle of the crisis. Time is for action. Reports are still very useful, but this is not where we need to be. So we really need to make sure we talk about solutions. We bring solutions to decision makers and to people also. And there are actually lots of people, as we've seen today, who are doing great work, positive actions, and still they need to have a lot of visibility. Just to give you an example, although I was in the project, I heard things today that I hadn't heard before. So I think this really is a proof that we need to improve that. And it's very important that we have this capacity to question ourselves and understand how we can improve that. At the same time, and this is where we focused our work in this project, decision makers are lost. They're operating in a more and more complex environment, let's say. It's not easy. We cannot expect when you guys are technicians or scientists and you know everything about your problem, you cannot expect a politician who has to deal with so many different issues to be fully, let's say, aware of your specific issue. So it's really important that we acknowledge all this. We see how the world is changing. We see how it's urgent to act. And we need to find new approaches in this constantly evolving world. So this led us to build an online interactive more than map. It's a series of map and data that I will show you in a minute. And the idea behind this, I fully share what Maria Jose was saying before. We need to be talking to our audience. They need to understand clearly and quickly what all this is about. So the ideas behind the concept were these actually. So we wanted to give a real live view of the situation, to understand decision makers, understand what was at stake. And also it's really important that we start to bridge much better science and decision-making processes. I know things are moving a lot also in this area, but it's not that you have science on one hand, environment on the other, and people on the other. it's really bridging environment and people and understanding what is the science behind. And one of the concepts we had was this. So this led us to launch this map and data. I'm going to show you the website in a second. And the idea is that without sounding super alarming, we wanted to show decision makers. Oops, I don't know if someone, I need to go back. Yeah. We need decision makers to understand what this is about, what are the implications. And I'm going to show you just an example. So we could take Buna. So that's, we're in Montenegro and Albania. I hope I'm going to. Okay. So what we do here is first we explain where we are, we explain what the issue is. We talk about the protection status because that's also important. And then here you can see from now until 2100 what's going to happen, and you can clearly see in real time what could be happening. Then we clearly explain what it means. We show the impacts at the socioeconomic level because this is extremely important to be connecting nature restoration and protection with especially in the Mediterranean, with what are the impacts on people and economies. So this is what we do with this work. And then one thing we did that we used also for a social media campaign is show what it's going to look like. And again, this is not to be scaring off people. This is to show a reality that is really, really happening. So this is to give you an idea. I'll close this and go back to the
Chantal, you still have half minute?
Yeah, I'm done. So in terms of results, what we've done is that besides showing this map either directly to decision makers, I wanted Alessio to comment on this, but I don't think we will have time. Where we've seen that showing this to decision makers is quite successful. We've on the other hand launched a campaign, an online campaign that started on the Mediterranean Coast Day in September. And just to show you that we have many different elements, but this mapping got a lot of success. We've been able to have a good level of interaction. And actually, although this campaign was mainly focusing decision makers, we're reaching media such as the Condé Nast Traveler, which is quite a prestigious media on tourism. So we see that it's beginning to go beyond, science decision makers. It's also reaching entire sectors that are key for the Mediterranean. So that's very quickly what happened with this specific tool.
Chantal,
thank you.
Thank you so much. Very important messages indeed on communication. Very impactful, actually, images on the sea level rise, as you said yourself, the need to systematize all the information. And today was, a case in point. We now move towards the end of this webinar with a very important session that picks on what was said also before, financial opportunities. Of course, we are raising awareness. Wetlands is raising higher in the political agenda, but of course, this needs to be backed by and supported by financial resources. So we will now move to two presentations. We have few minutes more allowed. So we'll now give the floor to Vincent Ernaud from NECB CMed, which is now the Interact Med, the Next Med, and then to Antonello Tino from Prima. And we'll close the webinar with these presentations. Please, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Alessandra. I'm activating my chronometer because I know it's very stressful for you to manage all this crazy and amazing event with so many speakers. Allow me to give a few words on the ENICBC Med program and on the program that is coming and will start next year, which will be called Interreg Next Med. So same program, different name, with a few differences, but not that much. I will make a very, very quick presentation. Of course, I promise only a few words on, sorry. Seems that the slides are not moving. Okay, as ENI CBC Med program, we are financing 80 projects in this programming period. We have projects on almost all topics that you can imagine, and not many are linked directly to wetlands, let's be honest, but we have a few of them that are linked. One is clearly in line with what you've been talking about today, especially I've heard the people from Murcia talking about Salinas. So we have a project fully dedicated to finance sustainable management models for artisanal salinas. So we're not talking of big industrial salinas, but small ones, trying to help them surviving and developing. Of course, this is from the economical point of view, but there is an impact on the long term, also on the ecosystem. Of course, everything is linked. And then we have another project. I think there were among the participants today. I'm not sure if they have been able to talk because I've not been able to listen to all parts, but so it's called Co-Evolve for BG. And their main goal is to try to protect sustainable tourism or to enforce sustainable tourism. And then we have a series of projects on water dedicated to improve water efficiency. So mainly increasing water efficiency. And we know that indirectly or directly in this case, there is a very big impact on water natural resources. Of course, if we are able to be more efficient and to spend less water on agriculture, I think, and I'm not an expert, but that wetlands will suffer much less. Let's now move to the new program. So we have left ENI CBC Med program. Interreg Next Med is coming. The program is a bit bigger than before because we have now 15 countries and we have 253 million euros. You can see the geographical coverage. We have 9 specific objectives. No time to talk about all of them, but a time to give you one message is that there is room for wetlands in many of the specific objectives. Let's think that the one project that we have on Salinas is a project that fit under the policy objective 1, building a smarter Mediterranean and strengthening SMEs. So at first sight, it's not linked to ecosystems, but in fact it is. So there is room. Please, whenever we are going to launch more information on our website, and of course, when we are going to launch the calls for proposals, have a deep look at our specific objectives, because ecosystems can fit almost everywhere. We still have one specific objective on water. This is very clearly linked to with you. And then we have one specific objective. This is new on promoting climate change, adaptation to and disaster risk prevention, fighting against catastrophes, and there, for example, floods or extreme drought can fit there. So I think that many ideas will find the space there. And then we have a specific objective on how to improve cooperation governance. This is the one on the extreme right, and there also room for your topic, room for this challenge, especially for regions and administration. One last slide. Calls for proposals. The first one will be launched next year. During the first semester, it will be open to all the specific objectives that you have just seen. And it will have 2 strands, one general and one for the use, because use is a very specific target of our program. And we think that they can contribute to all the challenges and to wetlands and ecosystems too. I'm arrived to the 5 minutes. I give the floor back to Alessandra. I just tell you that I'm available anytime to respond to your questions on this program or on the next one. Thank you very much, Alessandro, for inviting us.
Many thanks, Vincent. Just a final question. When will this new possibility, let's say, for projects be activated as of next year? Do you have an idea, second semester already, or?
Yes. Yeah, this is what we are all looking for, you and us. It should be the first semester of 23, maybe the end of the first semester. Let's say May, June. If we're able to do it before, we'll do it. Anyway, pay attention to our social networks and to our website, of course. We'll announce it on time.
Many thanks, Vincent. I will now give the floor to Antonella Ottino. Antonella, the floor is yours. Antonella?
Thank you. Do you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, and can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes, very well. So I can proceed. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to join this event today. First of all, let me thank the organizer, UFM MedWet, for inviting PRIMA to this conference, which address increasing importance which address a topic that's of increasing importance in the Mediterranean. And I also wish to thank the speaker for the previous session for their inspiring presentation. I am the PRIMA project coordinator. For those who not know PRIMA, very shortly, PRIMA is a long-term European partnership aiming to deploy joint research and innovation approaches to improve water availability, sustainable agriculture and food production in the Mediterranean region. The partnership has a geographical focus in the Mediterranean, of course, and comprises 90 participating states across both shores of the Mediterranean. And the program is mainly implemented through annual calls for proposal and on coordinated and well-structured set of activities. So concerning wetlands, so far the PRIMA program from its inception, which in 2018, has actively supported research and innovation to reestablish wetland habitats, but so far focusing on constructed wetlands, so for wastewater treatment. And in this sense, wetlands contribute to the Green Deal objective, but are expected to play a key role in the farm to fork strategy and the new Common Agricultural Policy 23-27, as potential measures supported by eco schemes which are aiming to provide stronger incentive for climate and environmental friendly farming practices. So here you can see some example of running project. By the way, Fit for Use and MedWet project are coming to their conclusion and aims to transform urban and farming wastewater into reclaimed irrigation water. These projects are now reaching, as I was saying, to the conclusion, and have produced very interesting pilots in different environment ready for upscaling at the regional level. But more recently, under the water, energy, food and ecosystem nexus approach, which is really mainstreamed in all the PRIMA action, a broader approach has evolved to include the constructed wetlands in a wider picture that involves integrative technologies to address sustainability issue in water, energy and food. And within the circular economy concept and the water, food, energy, ecosystem nexus, the constructed wetlands are aiming to build a multifunctional system that deliver multiple services with associated benefits for societies. And this is the case of our project Mara Mediterra, which are more recently, they have been selected in 2021 and Nexus project, which not only promote research and innovation of constructed wetlands as a nature-based solution, but are demonstrating the operational application within this more holistic nexus approach. And finally, our recently selected project, the news of the new selected project has been announced a few days ago, or on Monday. And those two projects are related to wetlands, and they're proposing hybrid solution, which are integrating natural wetlands with the green infrastructure. So we are moving to the only constructed wetland also to include natural wetlands and restoration of natural wetlands through these hybrid solutions. And then the next steps in the future. In the future, we are going to to enlarge and to further go in those constructed wetlands towards nutrient recovery. So since considerable nutrient loads are released to water bodies such as wetlands, the idea is to introduce the reuse of those nutrients. And this is a great economic and environmental potential to capture these nutrients and reuse them in agriculture. So for the next year, and this I can anticipate that in January, the new calls will be launched for PRIMA. We are proposing nutrients recycling in connection with wastewater treatment and reuse through constructed wetlands. And this is also an area with a strong policy emphasis, with the potential to contribute to solving multiple problems at once, so natural pollution and eutrophication, and so on. So these calls are defined in collaboration with the mission Soil, Restore Our Ocean and Waters, and are proposed in the next call that will be open in 2023. So from 17th of January, we are going to have the annual plan ready. And for the future, now PRIMA is starting discussing his future, and we are defining the new strategic agenda, and we are planning to include the restoration of wetlands in our future planning. So thank you very much.
Many thanks, PRIMA, many thanks, CBC Med. I think you have shown already how, out of the important, let's say, partnership and joint development and follow up to the priorities identified at regional level, you are already committing to support nature-based solution, and in particular wetlands within the next programming. Even more promising opportunities will come up in the next year. So many thanks for being with us. Many thanks also for answering to Palestine. We don't have, let's say, much time, but Palestine is, of course, part of many projects. I see that in the chat, and many thanks, Vincent, for replying. Let me conclude this very interesting webinar. Many thanks to all. With, let's say, a very short wrap up. We need radical action indeed to support nature-based solution, wetlands-based solution. Indeed, the changes needs to be systemic, involve citizens and consumers, as well, of course, as public and private authorities and stakeholders, different levels from national to local. We have now workable solution. Thank you for the impressive presentation on the real case studies that were shown today. And of course, this proves also how wetlands is progressively being recognized at a regional level, though this recognition again of its role is quite recent, and of course we need to work more and more on the aspects related to visibility, awareness, but also, let's say, engagement. Important points were made indeed on communication between science and policymakers. I mean, even from science, we need more clear, let's say, indication for the policymakers, for the decision makers, basically to understand the points at stake. Restoration, of course, was in the focus of COP27, will be even more in the focus of COP15. It's definitely in the focus of the new restoration law also being launched at European level, and of course EU remains a very important source of support and financing. To reply on more, let's say, logistical issues, PPTs, so presentation will be shared. Comments have been gathered. Please follow up with bilateral contacts should any comment or question still be pending. We will meet next year again for a third conference all together, but in the meanwhile, of course, work will go on, and next conference will be just another extremely important opportunity to update each other, to update this community on the advancements to come. So many thanks to everybody for your participation. It was a great pleasure. 100 steady participants for all over the time of the webinar. We close now playing a video on wetlands that was put together and is newly released. Thank you very much to everybody. Bye. Bye-bye.
I'm Hazem, Haresha Azraq Wetland Reserve Manager, working with the Royal Society for the Conservation of Nature as a wetland manager for 12 years. Azraq Wetland Reserve was an oasis in the eastern desert of Jordan. It dried up totally by early 90s, and RCN exerted a lot of efforts in order to get some of the oasis back. So we started rehabilitation and restoration project in 1994. It lasted for 4 years, for 1998. We aimed at restoring 10% of the former oasis, and we succeeded. Also, we created another activities and integrated conservation with also socio-economic projects and also ecotourism activities.
I am Anwar. I work as a tour guide inside the reserve. This reserve was established in 1978, and it's considering as a one side of Ramsar.
One of the challenges that is facing Azraq when we start restoration is the scarcity of water. Jordan is suffering of the lack of water.
This reserve was really dry. We have an aquifer under the ground between Saudi Arabia and Syria, and this one is a rechargeable one. The water came from Arab Mountain in Syria to this place because the reserve is huge. It's around 74 kilometers squared. The problem here, the extra pumping on the aquifer, that effect on the level of aquifer and its downsize, and all of the nature spring is dry now.
So that's why we faced a lot of problems, because the whole oasis disappeared. We succeeded to get some water and some life to the wetland again by support of the government, because we signed an agreement with them in order to get 1.5 to 2.5 million cubic meter in order to maintain the current ecological situation in the reserve.
We like helping the nature to back. We're repumping the water for the important things inside this place, especially the Azrak killifish, because it's endemic inside the place. It exists here only. This reserve is so famous with birds. The birds is starting moving from Europe to Africa and from Africa to Europe. Azrak, it's like a station for that bird.
You have to collaborate with your governments. You have to also collaborate with your community and also decision makers. So you have to have a solid relationships with the other sectors in order to support your work and your project. So this is very important to move forward with your restoration. MedWet Managers Network means a lot for Jordan wetlands because we can interact with them. We can exchange ideas. We can also exchange a lot of knowledge and information. And also we can get a new experience as they are running different wetlands in different countries.